Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on today's program, we're going to look at some major Texans injury updates that could impact the Texans roster cuts, which are due tomorrow, Tuesday. We'll be breaking down the Texans official 53-man roster whenever it happens, and I know DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio, they keep it close to the vest. But I'll tell you what we know, how this could impact the roster cuts come tomorrow, and what we could expect moving forward for this Texans roster. Before we get into all that, weekly live shows for the channel, they're coming this year. I'm thinking about doing it on Wednesdays, but I want to hear feedback from y'all. One, let me know, would you join me for Wednesday live shows? If I went live every Wednesday talking about the latest Texans news and rumors, allowing y'all to voice your opinions around the team, would Wednesday be a good day for y'all? Let me know yes or no. Little extra brownie points if you want to add in. What time? I was thinking maybe either 3 or 4 o'clock Central Time. So let me know. Would you be able to join us for our Wednesday live shows? What time works better for you? Or maybe do I have to switch it to a different day? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Let's get right into the first injury update. The injury update everybody wants to know around across the entire NFL, not just Texans fans. Fantasy owners around the world have been hitting me up saying, Jeremy, what do you know about Joe Mixon? All my guys in the office here at Chat Sports, all the other hosts of all the other team channels, they're getting ready for their fantasy drafts, and they're saying, Jeremy, what about Joe Mixon? Tell me about Joe Mixon. What can I know? Well, this is what we know so far. He had an injury/re-injury during a non-football activity this offseason. There's been reported no structural damage to Joe Mixon in that injury, that lower extremity. He visited a specialist a couple weeks ago that deals with electromagnetic therapy. And basically what that is helping basically promote healing around whatever the injury is. So obviously he's been working on it, and rehab's been tough and complicated. Remember, like a month ago, I believe Joe Mixon put on his Instagram him working out. It was him at a gym doing a bunch of stuff that would make you feel very confident that he'll be ready to start the year. But now, very murky on whether or not he will be ready to go week 1 up against the LA Rams. As we look at this Texans running back depth chart, they set themselves up pretty nicely to, weather the storm of Joe Mixon not being out there, not being able to compete in week 1. And I think with Nick Chubb, Dameon Pierce, Agumbawale, Woody Marks, I think the Texans are set up pretty nicely. And I would say this. I would say him playing week 1, it's a slim chance. I'd give it around a maybe 25% chance that Joe Mixon's ready to go week 1, because I think it could go either way of Joe Mixon being ready to go week 1, or maybe they keep him out a couple weeks. But the big question is going to be, come tomorrow, do they place him on IR, meaning basically the first 4 games of the season for him are done, he can't come back until week 5, or do they keep him on the initial 53-man roster, then move him back to the injury list, and maybe try to get him to return by week 2 or week 3 of the regular season? That's going to be a big question mark around this Texans roster cutdown day on whether or not they keep some guys on the initial 53-man and then move them back to the injured list, or do they not keep them on the 53-man, put them on IR to start the season, and then basically say they're not going to play for the first 4 games. I would lean towards they're going to keep Joe Mixon on the initial 53-man. I think he should be good to go come week 2, come week 3, maybe week 4. But if they're going to play on the conservative side, if they're going to say, hey, we like what we have in Nick Chubb, in Dameon Pierce, Woody Marks, the rookie out of USC, maybe they're like, we don't want to rush Joe Mixon back. And now thinking about it a little bit more, just as I'm talking, the Texans are very conservative with their injuries. Look what happened with Christian Harris last year. They held him out. Maybe the same thing with Joe Mixon. I think we could see it either way come tomorrow. Maybe he's on IR to start the year, or they keep him on the initial 53-man roster. But I'll break it down as soon as we get that information, because DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio were asked today, and mum's the word from the Texans front office so far around the Joe Mixon injury. They don't want to spill any beans, not giving any advantage to any other teams, letting them know what the injury status is of multiple guys across this Texans roster, including Joe Mixon. All right, let's go to another injury that could affect the 53-man roster cutdown day. Blake Fisher, and this one's not getting talked about as much in my opinion. He sprained his ankle week 2 of the preseason up against the Carolina Panthers and basically hasn't practiced since then. Had that sprained ankle against the Panthers. And before that, wasn't looking really good either. He looked okay against the Panthers, but training camp and the first preseason game and basically this offseason, Blake Fisher was running with the 2s, sometimes even with the 3s. So depending on how they view Blake Fisher, I don't know if all things considered, if he was 100% healthy, I don't think it would be a big question mark on whether they keep him on the initial 53-man roster or they look at one of the other guys, the other backup tackles that they have, like an Austin Deculus, like, I don't know, Zach Thomas. Like, I don't know if that would affect them, how they, keep him on the roster or not. I think he's safe this year. Maybe they keep him on IR to start the year, but he's on some thin ice. He's on some thin ice. In my 53-man roster projection, I said, hey, why not? I had the Texans cutting their ties with him. They did the same thing with Kenyon Green. They traded him to the Philadelphia Eagles, and look what's happened there. The Eagles ended up cutting Kenyon Green as well, a former first-round pick out of Texas A&M. So let me know. Odds that Blake Fisher is on the Texans roster next season. I don't think, even though I think maybe it's the best decision, I don't think they're going to cut their losses just yet. I think they probably keep Blake Fisher on the team this year. But next year, scale it 0 to 100. 0, he's 100% off the team. If you say 100, you might as well think he's the starter going into next season. Let me know down in the comments section what you think. The odds Blake Fisher is on the Texans roster next season. Right now, I'm giving it probably a 30% chance that he's on the Texans roster next year. This is a massive year for Blake Fisher. This is a prove-it year for him. And I know that's weird coming from somebody who's a rookie, somebody who's still really young. But I just don't see the swarm mentality from him. I mean, we've seen from training camp practices, from other things, where other guys look like they're giving that extra effort. They're giving that, relentless mindset. There was a photo circulating where all the Texans offensive linemen were doing push-ups after practice. Everybody was in push-up position besides Blake Fisher. He was on his knees, looking like he was about to throw up. So if you're a professional athlete, in my opinion, you got to be better than that. You got to be ready to go. And it seems like he was not ready to go. He didn't prep this offseason. He didn't put that work in. He didn't have that special work ethic that the beginning of Swarm or the relentless mindset. And that's what DeMeco preaches. That's what this whole Texans front office preaches that they want in their players, is that relentless mindset. And I just don't see it. And as I look at the Texans depth chart, yeah, they might keep, Connor McDermott, who they claimed off of waivers after getting released by the Patriots. Zach Thomas, Austin Deculus, among others. Blake Fisher, though, on thin ice. I think he makes the roster. Also, could start out on that IR list, so they are able to keep another tackle, maybe like an Austin Deculus, on the initial 53-man roster. Now, coming up, Texans injury outlook on the defensive side of the football. Let's look at the other side and look at some injuries that might have DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio going, I wonder how we configure this Texans roster. I'll tell you what those injuries are coming up in just a moment, but today's show wouldn't be possible without my friends over at PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app out there with millions upon millions of active users. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Preseason football, no more. No more. We get some real football, baby. And we don't have to wait 2 weeks for, official football. We got a little appetizer coming this weekend, baby. I'm so ready. I'm so ready for some college football. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. And if you want to see my lineup for this amazing slate this weekend, well, I kept it pretty simple for you. I have the Demon pick with Arch Manning, Texas, Ohio State. Let me know down in the comment section who you got in that matchup. Easy one here. The Demon pick more on 0.5 rushing and receiving touchdowns. So Arch, he's got to get in the end zone. I'm guessing a rushing touchdown, but hey, maybe a little Philly. Maybe a little Philly receiving touchdown. I don't know. And then Garrett Nussmeier, I really like this kid out of LSU. I actually covered him in high school football. Great kid, great athlete. Give me the more on 279.5 passing yards. You can use these or make your own lineup. Just go ahead and do it over at PrizePicks right now. Go ahead, download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. It's as easy. 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you place your entries. Just choose more or less, and you watch the winnings roll in. Like my buddy Alper over here. He's one of the best I know at looking at these projections. And I absolutely love playing PrizePicks with him. I know he loves it. I love it too. Get started today with our friends over at PrizePicks. Let's look at the defensive side. Denico Autry. And my man Aaron Wilson, he's keeping it down. He also has a YouTube channel. Talked about a lot of this stuff. Great follow if you haven't already. Aaron Wilson on Twitter, but also he has his own YouTube channel. So go check him out there as well. He mentioned that Denico Autry looks healthy. That Denico Autry could be good to go week 1, and it's just been a precautionary measure of him not playing training camp, him not being in the preseason. So that's good news. But on the same side, it might be bad news for the Houston Texans. Only because I'm not saying him being healthy is bad news for the Texans because he's a good player. But it's bad news when you're looking at the roster cutdown day on who you keep, because you have Darrell Taylor, Derek Barnett as the backup defensive ends, obviously behind Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter. But if Denico Autry is good to go, if you're keeping him on the initial 53-man roster, that means you're going to have to cut a good edge rusher. No doubt about it. You'll have to cut somebody who is very talented. And I think Autry, the decision on him affects 2 guys in particular. Dylan Horton and Solomon Byrd. Both have looked awesome this offseason. Both have looked really good throughout training camp, throughout the preseason. So, the fact that, Autry coming back, it's a good thing, right? He's a good player on the defensive line. He can play inside, play outside. He gives you a lot of positional flexibility. But in the same breath, if you're keeping him on the roster, that means you're going to have to make a decision very soon on whether you cut one of these guys or possibly both of them. And I think Solomon Byrd has showed out very well. I think if he ends up getting cut, I don't think he clears waivers. I think another team picks him up. There's enough teams that need defensive ends that look at both of these guys and say, hey, look at their product of work during the preseason. They've looked really good. So the Texans are going to have to make a tough decision there on whether they allow one of these guys to basically hit the free agent market by not making the 53-man roster and allowing other teams to kind of come in, swoop up, and take your really talented defensive ends in Dylan Horton and Solomon Byrd. Next up, let's look at rookie Jaylen Reed, defensive back. Remember, he was having a great training camp, got injured, and then had that 3-week timeline for whenever he would be healthy. Good to go. Timeline is kind of met up right here with the 3 weeks. So this week would be 3 weeks for Jaylen Reed. Is he good to go? I mean, from what I've seen, him on the sidelines, him kind of interacting around the team, that's not an indicator of whether or not he's ready to play, ready to go, but looks in good spirits. Looks like he might be ready to go week 1. But the question is, will he be on IR? I think, if he's good to go, I think the Texans should keep him on the 53-man roster, activate him rather than keep him on IR, because the Texans' safety depth, like the starting guys, are fantastic. The depth is a little bit of a concern, though, guys. Behind Calen Bullock, Jalen Pitre, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, M.J. Stewart, okay. Jalen Mills you brought in, okay. Miles Bryant, he's been working at safety and been working at cornerback. So, okay, but none of those guys, I think, have near the upside of a Jaylen Reed, the 6th-round pick out of Penn State. And the biggest kind of wrench in this whole plan continues to be Jimmy Ward. Future still in question. I believe they'll keep him on the IR, not keep him on the 53-man roster, but kind of push that can down the road and see what happens. But I mean, a big kind of gray cloud, large looming question over the safety room has a little bit to do with this individual right here in Jimmy Ward. We've talked about his off-the-field issues. We've talked about kind of what he's battling on the legal side, but even on the injury side, he hasn't practiced. He hasn't been at training camp. He hasn't done any of those things. And for a guy who's been in the league as long as Jimmy Ward, I know it probably doesn't mean as much. Same with Denico Autry. Both those guys have the skins on the wall. They've been on the league long enough to where I feel like they'd probably be good to go without training camp, without preseason, maybe a little rusty, but I think they have enough experience in the league to step right in. I don't know if Jimmy Ward will do that. I don't know whether or not he'll return to the Texans roster this season. Big question mark still looming around him and this safety room. Lastly, let's look at Jake Hansen, the linebacker. And this one is a little bit more nuanced because Jake Hansen got injured in that final preseason game up against the Detroit Lions. But then he returned. He returned to action. And now that doesn't always mean that he's good to go moving forward. We know these athletes, whenever they're in game mode, they have the adrenaline going. We've seen guys who they played through an injury, and then after the game, it's like, oh yeah, actually, he had a sprained this. He had a, this sort of injury. And once the adrenaline wore off, they're like, yeah, you're going to have to miss a couple weeks now. Was Jake Hansen a part of that where, he got injured, was back in because he's fighting for a roster spot? I don't know if that's the case. I don't know where he is with his injury, but it will be a very, very, very tough decision between him, Nick Niemann, Jamal Hill. Those three guys have showed out a ton this offseason. Azeez Al-Shaiir, Henry To'oTo'o, both didn't play in that final preseason game, so I'm keeping my depth chart like this. I'm keeping them as the starters right now, Azeez and Henry. Christian Harris, EJ Speed, I think those are the other two locks in the linebacking room, so that brings you to 4. Do the Texans keep 5, maybe 6 linebackers on the roster? It's going to be a tough decision, but it's going to come between those three guys I just mentioned. Jake Hansen, Nick Niemann, and Jamal Hill. And Jake Hansen, if he's injured, it's going to make the decision a little bit easier for DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio, but he has played well. He's been with this team for a couple years. So I think with the Jake Hansen injury, depending on the severity of it, maybe they kind of stash him on IR, maybe move him to that side to, once again, kick the can down the road, make the decision later on in the season, because they really like Jake Hansen. They like what he brings to the table from a linebacking standpoint and from a special team standpoint as well. So we'll have to see how Jake Hansen, his injury plays out, and whether or not he makes the final 53-man roster. And a quick reminder, you can follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Chuggs. I'll be bringing you everything from roster cutdown day as soon as we get the Texans 53-man roster, who they keep on the roster, who they move to IR, what decisions this front office makes. I'll be breaking it down here on the channel. Another reason why you got to hit that subscribe button for Texans news and rumors content all year long. I got you with the latest updates. Don't miss a single moment here on Texans Today. Make sure you go down and hit that sub button.